Hi and welcome to the Evolve CEO podcast. I'm your host Greg Gillies, and this podcast is designed for high-achieving CEOs, business founders and entrepreneurs who are looking for ways to expand beyond their business accomplishments, their life and their relationships. We will be taking a deep dive into all topics relating to success, love and happiness, and we will be talking a lot around healing, alignment and manifestation, which is the key to actualizing ourselves and reaching our highest potential. Look forward to you tuning in to this week's episode. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Evolve CEO podcast. So this week we are going to be talking about family dynamics and parenting. And family dynamics is your own family, so wife and children, but also your family of origin, your parents and your siblings and your upbringing. This is a really important topic for a lot of our clients because we work with the married businessmen with children who have got busy lives that are trying to be the best in every area of their life. So we are definitely not experts. We are learning as we go, as children grow and change and develop. But we have learned and we have adjusted and adapt, and we've done a lot of work on becoming better people, better parents. So we'd love to share this topic with you today.
I guess the one thing we would say is the time in your life where you need to be the best version of yourself. But it's also the time in your life that you've got so many more demands and pressures and limited space for self, which makes it really challenging.
Totally. So what Tracy's referring to is what we discuss with our clients around the parenting period. So as a couple, you go through stages of your relationship, and the parenting period is where we actually need to show up as the best version of ourselves because we are the role models, we are the examples, the way we show up, the way we deal with our own emotions, our own mental health, physical health. Everything is what our children will reflect, which brings me to another part of what we discuss with a lot of people when it comes to parenting is understanding that you're a conduit. You are a conduit for generational change. So if we're going to be talking about parenting and you want to become the best version of yourself and the best parent, you need to understand your own upbringing and what you learned from parenting when you were a child from your own mum and dad, because we pick up their beliefs, we pick up their energy, we pick up their dynamics, how they had their marriage, whether they were successful, whether they are still happily married, whether they divorced, whether there was a lot of fighting. All of the dramas of the upbringing that you had becomes our imprint, which we spoke about brain development, and we're going to be talking about that again with children today. But this becomes our belief systems, and this becomes what we bring into our own family and our own parenting. However, a lot of the parenting skills and what we learned as children, we now live in a different world. We are in a completely different world. And the amount of information and the amount of emotional intelligence that our children need and the dynamics of the world we now live in, we as parents, we have to evolve like way beyond our parents and our grandparents. So it's nothing on them. It's just they parented for the times, and we live in unprecedented times around just what children are exposed to. So we need to be the example. So let's chat about, I guess, the pressure that parents are under nowadays with how busy we are. We're trying to get ahead. We're trying to be successful. We're trying to provide for our children. A lot of our children, a lot of like us and our clients' kids, they don't know what real pain is like. They've got it pretty good, right? Like we've set them up to have an amazing life. They don't go without. Yeah, it's just different.
Although we do learn through challenge, so sometimes that's hard because I think as a parent we want to take away all that, especially emotional pain. And I know for us, probably the biggest thing we want to teach our kids is that emotional intelligence. I feel like the world is losing it. And, again, it starts with us doing that healing work and really kind of being more attuned to the deeper needs or the deeper story, because sometimes, again, we talked about, doing that inner work and healing work to be the parent that I want to be, because otherwise often we're just replaying the past, and often the past that we didn't like. I know there's many times as a parent, I will even respond or react in ways that are just almost like triggers or like autopilot or all of those things, because it's that time when there's so much pressure and demands. But maybe we just want to start, Greg, with talking about those developmental stages of going through as a child, so you kind of understand a bit more where they're coming from or what they're wanting, how some of these things show up.
100%. So let me, we've spoken about this in the mental health podcast, but let me just reflect back on every single human being goes through a brain development stage, and typically 0 to 7 is the imprint period, where it's like the brain is a sponge, and it's like everything in that child's environment, from the energy to the parenting, to the influence, to where they live, to friendships, just every dynamic and the way their parents interact and whether they're happily and married and loving and all that sort of stuff, it creates our baseline belief systems about whether we are loved, worthy, and safe. And at that age, that is all we are looking for. We are looking for love, safety, and are we worthy? And we get that from the environment and our parents and our siblings and the closest influential people in our life. And then we move into what's called the hero period, and this is where the brain's neocortex and the logical brain comes online and starts to develop, and the child all of us start to question things, and we start to expose ourselves to other information. And in this period, as Tracey's going to talk about this a bit more in depth, but when we hit teenage, we actually start going through a neural pruning process where we're starting to prune away the stuff that doesn't serve us. And I think that's a really important thing for everybody to understand, is because our children go through all of these stages, and we can't continue to parent them exactly the same at every stage, because we need to parent and we need to adjust as parents to understand what stage they're going through, whether it's mental development, emotional development, friendship development. They just go through all of these stages. And if we're just so stoic and we're just so stuck in our ways, and when it's all about force and discipline, it will come back and bite you, because kids are just so exposed to so much information nowadays. So let's talk about a few of those stages.
Well, I guess I'll just add to what you said about those younger years. They're easier because you're their world. They look up to you again. They're kind of creating that blueprint for life. But all they're really asking is, am I loved? And they're asking you. But what happens is, as they go into maybe, like, I want to say 12, it's getting younger and younger. It's almost like that peer orientation stage. And due to social media and all these influences now, it's actually happening younger and younger. And what they actually do is they stop asking you, and they're asking a different question. They're asking, what do you think of me? And so the reference point would also be like, those influencers, what they're watching on social media, all of this information that, let's be honest, half of it is not great. It doesn't really set the right, I don't know, what's the words, tone, expectations, that real foundation for, setting up for success again. So it's like they're asking this question, but they're not asking you anymore. And also, from those teenage year times, it also gets even harder, because Greg discussed about, it's called neural pruning. And it's like we've made so many neural connections as we grow up, the brain has to start getting rid of some. So what happens is, it's like their prefrontal cortex will go offline for most of the time, about 80% of the time. And so they are just functioning from that survival brain, so that kind of fight or flight place. So it makes it really hard for communication, because almost like you're suddenly in this battleground, I will say that. I cannot do anything right. I say something, it's the wrong thing. It's like they can't even hear you. So it's almost like in those teenage years, they're also asking everybody else all of these things about themselves. They're not so much orientated by you anymore, but they've also got this time where they're offline. So again, I guess my advice there is pick your battles. Like I know with my oldest daughter, she can't even hear me half the time. It's almost like I've got to find this period of time in the day where she is receptive to me so I can speak with her properly, and we can use that tiny bit of time to maintain this relationship that constantly feels quite strained. And I know for her, in the morning, sometimes we'll go and do a beach walk, and she'll be really great and we'll talk and it's really lovely. But later on, if I said the same things, wow, it's like I've just completely, I don't know, it's not received well. And then bedtime, usually I find our kids will often want to chat on bedtime. So then the next stage is, Greg kind of talked about it as well, that we go into the stage. It happens from probably about the age of 18 onwards. And it's called the process of elimination. And what it is, it's like I've literally just taken on all these kind of beliefs about myself, and half of them are not even true. Or possibly they weren't even my beliefs. I just accumulated them from my parents without question. And so then I start to say, is this really mine? Somebody said I was this or that, I feel like maybe unlovable, or maybe I'm a loser, or I'm unworthy, or all of these things. And I start to go, you know what, that's not true. And so that is a process that people will start to do. I have to say some people do it much later in life, can start from about 18. I probably didn't do it till my 30s. Wow. So neither did you, Greg, really. So there's all those stages. And again, as a parent, I think we have to be able to be aware of where they're at and what stages, and what they need from me to almost help facilitate. It just changes.
100%. So I want to talk about that teenage stage, that neural pruning where their prefrontal cortex goes offline, where their behavior can be atrocious. A lot of parents who have got teenagers or have had teenagers, they've been through this process where it's kind of like you start butting heads, and it's kind of like this battle of the wills. And I've had to learn how to just take a step back and not take on, I guess, the words and the energy that can be said in these heated arguments, because I need to understand the process of what our children are going through. Now, I'll tell you a story. I did a post on LinkedIn talking about my 14-year-old daughter and I are clashing a lot, and just what I'm learning from it and what I'm trying to do and showing up as a parent. And there was massive amount of engagement. A lot of people saying, I hear you. I know we're going through the same process. It's difficult. Some people have been through it and they just go, it changes again and you'll get through it and it'll be great. But there was one guy in particular, I'm not going to name names, but he literally just said she needs a smack in the head. And I was disgusted because I didn't retaliate to that and put my beliefs back on it. But there was a back and forth conversation, and I just knew straight away this was this man's upbringing. And he's just like, kids need to be dominated and disciplined to respect their elders and put in their place. Now, I believe in discipline, and we are quite hard on our children. And I believe that they need to have a level of respect. But we as adults can't just force our beliefs on these children as they are developing, because that is us not respecting the stages that they're going through. And yes, they're our children, and yes, we're responsible for them, but they're also a soul. They're also a human being. And if your children are going through a developmental stage and it's challenging for them, and they're going through massive hormonal adjustments, and they're going through a natural developmental stage where their actual brain is changing, and you have an argument and they say things that they don't mean, or it's just in conflict, and you're just running them down and trying to dominate and control them as a way for them to behave better, that is where their beliefs about themselves are going to come in. This is where the programming's got to come in. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying that as parents, it's our responsibility to educate ourselves around exactly what happens at each stage of our children's development so that we can adjust and not just be these dominating parents. Because a lot of us grew up in an era, I know for myself, I used to butt heads with my dad, but he learned how to parent from his dad, and his dad come back from the war And it's just a completely different mindset, right? So no pointing fingers at my father's parenting or my grandfather's parenting. We're just in a different time. We are in a time where you shouldn't have excuses around poor parenting, because there's more information about us understanding our children's stages so that we can adjust and adapt and work with them. Yeah.
I think we find it a bit challenging that
All parents find it challenging.
We
it's the
are
hardest thing ever.
we very say what we mean and express yourself and emotions, and that's fine. And then sometimes those big emotions in the kids, or they're outspoken and unruly, and I would like to whip them into shape. But again, this is just what we've kind of. That's again.
That's because we are open. We can be an intense family. We all share our emotions and we don't hide them. We don't suppress them. So that creates some interesting dynamics in our home.
In saying that, they behave very beautifully at school. And so that would be a gauge. Like, again, it's a safe space, the home. You usually end up wearing, that emotional upset or whatever. And often people find it hard, anyone, to really know exactly sometimes what the full story is of why they're upset, and it might just look like an explosion.
Now, another thing that I want to talk about is you can't have one parenting style for all children, because all human beings are unique at soul level. Yeah. And I want Tracey to talk about this and use our 3 children as an example, that they're all in the same family, same upbringing, but they are all uniquely different. And if we don't understand them in their own uniqueness and adjust our parenting skills and behavior to support them based on who they are, then they're all going to end up growing up and being adults. And one of them might have a lot of trauma and go backwards in life, while the other one excels and succeeds in life. And as parents, we'll be like, why? They all had the same opportunity. Why is one an absolute mess and the other one is an absolute success? And that is the reason why it's really important to understand your children uniquely. And this is Tracey's gifts, because it is based at your soul level.
So it's that age-old question of that nurture or nature. And they both play a role, but the nature, as in we're all spiritual beings having this human experience, and we're all different at soul level, and it's like there's different qualities or different makeup to a person's soul, and that's how they're here to experience themselves. So to make it, what I'm actually saying here, understandable, let's take our 3 children. We've got 3 children. They're all really different
ages.
So Georgie's the oldest. She is 14, going on about 20 something. So she has always been like, autonomy for her is really big. She is about kind of creating what she wants. She often has always wanted to be older than what she is. It's like she can't wait to be an adult. So she's in charge of herself and her choices. She's very driven. She's very successful. And this is just kind of who she is. So even from a young child, she was really hard to parent. Very, very hard, because she was so kind of headstrong and stubborn. Again, we could have some of those qualities ourselves, but so that would be Georgie. And then our middle daughter, Charlie. So she is 12.
Yeah.
We got that right.
14, 12, and 10.
Okay.
Charlie's 12, middle child.
So she's just started high school now, but Charlie is the most beautiful soul. She is divine love. It's almost like being in her presence is healing. She would never say a bad word. She makes everyone feel good about themselves. But for her, it's about that connection. Then I'll just say Jones, and then I'll say White's. And so then there's Mr. Jones. So he's our youngest, our son, Jones. And he is 10. So Jones is
divine power.
He's about power. And he is, again, he wants to be able to make his own choice. He hates feeling like he has no choice. He, again, feels a little bit challenging to parent because he wants to do it his way. All of these dynamics are really different. So let's say we're talking about healing. Let's say we're talking about somebody in a situation of a family that something happens, and for somebody else like Charlie, if something, she didn't feel safe, or that love or that connection, if something happened, then for her it would be like taking away oxygen. She just, honestly, it would just make her crumble. She probably wouldn't even be able to step out of herself to move forward. Where the likes of Georgie, you know, when you hear stories like Ann Jones, adversity has made someone grow stronger. They had maybe some big trauma or something happen in life, and it's like fuel to the fire, and they use it. The same as if at school, if somebody said to Georgie, you're this and that, it's like water off a duck's back, where Charlie wears it all as if it's completely true. So again, that's why you can have people in a family and you all experience the same things. So I also feel like as a parent, you know, again, I will worry and I'll be like, you know, again, I check my behavior, but again, for each child, they take different meaning to things because they're different at what their inherent needs are, or kind of that deeper, you know, place of who they actually are. And so it sometimes will be in those moments you don't even think that you realize you did anything wrong, but that will be the scars that they take through their life. And again, we're all responsible for doing our own healing. That's what we're here to do. We're here to sort of have these lessons, or again, things will play out for us through our life, and they're the big things that we're here to learn. So we can't really parent our children all the same, and understanding more of what they need allows me to kind of deliver on what it is to sort of support them.
So we've done a lot of healing, and we need to be highly, highly conscious of this, because Charlie, divine love, our middle daughter, she always wants to please. So if we ask her to do something, she obligates. She will do it. She won't challenge us. She won't fight us. So she's easy to parent. It's easy to gravitate to want to be around a child that is easy for us, especially when we're busy and we've got so much stuff going on in our life. But Jones and Georgie, they'll challenge us. Like, Georgie's like my way or the highway. She's going to be really successful in life. But we also know that she feels this level of comparison around how we can energetically show up for Charlie versus her, because quite often it feels really heightened, and it can easily turn into a fight or a battle with Georgie if everybody's busy and there's a lot going on. So we just need to be mindful of that. And then Jones, this is going to be a segue into another topic. Is Jones is a 10-year-old boy, super, super, super intelligent, really good at school, but also needs to have a lot of downtime. He's easily addicted to gaming and technology. So a lot of our fights in our home is around that. And we have to be really, really disciplined with him and put rules and restrictions around what he can and can't have and do, which is hard because a lot of his mates are on roadblocks, and they're gaming and they're communicating and they're building friendships through these games. But if we let Jones just do what he wants for hours and hours on end, when we finally take him off it, he's like a different child. It's like his brain has just gone through this frying process, which, to be honest, it is. And this is the next biggest challenge. Sorry, we just need to let our other child, which is a cavoodle dog, in. This is a really, really big challenge, right? Because we see it time and time again. Parents are so busy. There's so much going on that we just need some peace, and we just need some balance in the home. And if a kid is just losing it and going on and on and on about wanting to be on gaming and technology and all that sort of stuff, a lot of parents, and we're guilty of it, we can just succumb and just go, okay, and the child will not regulate themselves, so they won't know when enough is enough to stop it, that we're constantly having to monitor. So this is a massive challenge for a lot of people. And this also ties back into brain development. Now, we're not just going to pinpoint our son around this, but our other girls, because they're in high school, they're allowed a phone, right? So they've got their own phone, and their communication and social media and Snapchat with their friends is all through these phones. So we need to develop the emotional intelligence within ourselves. We need to create the behaviors around our technology usage in the home, as an example, and we need to educate and support. And sometimes we have to be really, really firm to be fair that our kids understand how unhealthy it is to spend too much time having all of your connection and relationships through a device, or spending too much time on screens. So we're constantly educating them with all the research and the information that comes in around how it affects the brain, how it's overstimulating, how screens at night is suppressing melatonin. But you can scream and yell and tell your kids to get off technology and ban them and take their phones and all that sort of stuff. But if we're not doing it ourselves, we're the example. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think people truly understand how impactful or the negative side effects that the devices have on people's brains and brain, all of these different neurological structures. And a child's developing, but I know I found it hard when the school changed to kind of full devices. It was just another avenue, especially our younger son, to get more kind of, it's forefront of mind and he wants it all the time, where I see a bit of a difference with our older kids. I feel like the world's changed very, very quickly and it's almost the new norm now. But again, I remember I've gone to school meetings for things and then I've talked to people about how it's not good for your neurological structures and how much stress it creates. And I can see that they're really confused and shocked, that they honestly don't understand how bad it could be for somebody. And again, we sort of talk to our kids about this. They do use it because, again, that's the world we live in, right?
We can't remove them 100% from it.
I think as a parent, being more aware of what it's actually doing and then creating rules. Like I do a lot of obviously high spiritual work, and I guess you could call me a medium. I hear messages and then I heal people off it. But I remember one day with my children, I was having a really hard time. I think it was over COVID and we were homeschooling and all this rubbish and I was kind of losing it a bit. And I went outside and I sat with myself, and sometimes, people would think spirit is going to say all these nice things. I thought it was going to say, be more tolerant and patient and loving. And it didn't. It pretty much said to me, you are the captain of your ship. So command it. Because again, we often have these conversations with Jones that if we just let him do whatever he wanted, that would not be good health.
No.
We can't kind of do that. So again, what are those, those boundaries or those rules to have them live within, but be firm, but be fair? Again, that's kind of parenting.
And also understanding the dynamic that if all of their friends, that's how they interact, communicate, have fun, and you remove it from them, it can cause conflict in friendships because that's the way they're connecting. So parents could talk about technology and gaming and social media for hours and hours and hours because, let's face it, it is one of the biggest challenges in the modern world of parenting, and it causes a lot of the fights and the conflict in the home. But we seriously need to be mindful of our children's mental health, because too much of that is going to control what they believe about themselves, is going to overstimulate a developing brain, which is going to cause major stress, which is going to show up in the later stages of life. And it's also disconnecting them from spirit. So our 10-year-old son, his wind down, or after he's done sport or a big day of school, all he wants to do is just lose himself in an iPad or the TV. And it's usually scrolling through YouTube and just watching other people do silly stuff and so on.
Say about when we went and did that high school tour and what the plaque said.
Yeah, so here's an example of the modern world on our children's brains. When we did tours of high schools for our eldest daughter to start high school, there was a psychology department and there was a plaque on the front of the psychology department of one of the high schools. And it said the stress and the mental health and the anxiety of a teenage high school child, and this was back in 2021, is the same as somebody who is admitted to a psych ward in the 1950s. So the mental stress and stimulation that our children, the anxiety and the mental health that our children are now exposed to and going through as a norm, like just standard, would have somebody locked up in the 1950s as a psych patient.
But I would see this time and time again, especially as my kids are getting older with their friends that come. I can see the amount of anxiety and all of this kind of just how the level that they're functioning at. It's quite sad for people because, again, if we talked it in the brain about the mind that we've spoken about is a really great podcast to listen to, but pretty much with the brain and your neurological structures, every single thing, every single bit of information you take in, your brain has to process it. So again, how much time are your kids getting that downtime? It's honestly not enough just to sleep to re-regulate. And then anxiety, children won't even know what it really is. They can't even verbalize it properly. So a big thing for us is talking about emotions. Some people think that some of these things, anxiety and those things, are just an emotional response. There's not. There's physical structures that are not functioning properly, neurotransmitters in the brain, all of these things. Technology and those things just done again and again and no space for that re-regulation time is having a massive impact. But I would suggest, I see these children, I see them really with this anxious baseline already. And we do a lot of work with our kids about talking about how they're feeling, talking about, all of these things, how to maybe calm their mind down and do these maybe even breathing techniques. Because what happens is, as well, a lot of people will try and process their emotional stuff through their physical body. You're not meant to do that. Again, with emotions, there's an emotional intelligence, and this is what we need to develop in our children. A lot of adults don't even have this emotional intelligence. It's hard. Emotions can feel really big and really scary and really hard, especially if I'm not taught how to work through things and deal with things and process how I'm actually feeling, because our emotions are like calling us into action. It's showing us where we need to be looking or working or resolving something. But if we're not taught how to do that, we often shy away.
So the first thing you need to do when it comes to parenting is look at yourself and look at how you handle your emotions. Look how you escape from yourself. Look at how over energy you are in your mind, how much you overthink, overanalyze, over worry. How busy is your mind? How much silent time do you give your mind? Yeah. And when you want downtime, is it scrolling through social media on your phone or watching Netflix series? Because that's where the behavior is coming from. And I'm not saying you can't do that, but we have to be the example, because so many things, every single podcast we do, and we talk about mental health, burnout, stress, all of these things that are linked to the cascading effect of illness and disease and mental health and everything that's going on in this world, which is getting faster and faster, is all because we've all normalized the speed of the world. And we all need to be really proactive in slowing down. We need to slow down ourselves. We need to get out into nature. Like, everybody knows this, but they don't do it. And they don't do it with their children, because if your mind as the parent is so overactive and busy with everything that you need to think about, that you're not making time to take your kids out and get them away from devices, then it's your responsibility.
Because even if you're not saying it, children will also take on like depression. They'll take on your anxiety. As a mother, I was so stressed out. I had, anxiety, depression, all of these things. Again, looking back at my mum and how hard she kind of had it as well, it's like we have to change these things within ourselves. I think the biggest thing we've done for our kids is to go through that healing process together, because we're completely different people now than what we were, when we first had children. And it's really nice for them to see that you continually work on yourself, and that's what it's about. It's about moving forward, progressing and evolving. And if they see you doing that, that's a really good platform and foundation for them to do the same.
And there is no such thing as being a perfect parent. It's impossible. It's because you're dealing with these unique individuals, these souls, your children. They're unique, right? And they're actually here for us as adults to learn massive, massive lessons. Yeah, it's not just us being the teacher. We be the student by what we learn about ourselves by parenting, because it doesn't matter how many books you read on parenting. No one sets you up for parenting. No one sets you up for the stages you need to go through, because the dynamics are huge, right? Even us talking about how our 3 kids are all very, very, very unique, and we need to be aware of that. But then we need to be aware of the dynamics of how our other children see us parenting their siblings and so forth. So we're not here to try and make sure our children grow up and to be absolutely perfect and never have any problems. I guarantee you my children are all going to have to do the inner work and the therapy and the releasing. They need to clear me, because my past self, the drinking, the anger, everything that they was experienced when I was at my worst, when they were young kids, they've got that in their programming. So I'm not here to try and be the perfect parent. I'm not here to try and create the perfect children. But what I am here is to be the best version of myself, so that my children will look at me as a role model, as an example for them to go and find out who they are. Because they need to find out who they are, not just become a mini version of who I expect them to be. I'll support them. I'll encourage them. I'll love them. I'll give them the emotional support and all that sort of stuff. But they're still going to have challenges. You want them to have challenges. That's how we grow and learn.
I just think, Bree, the last thing is, we would always apologise for our behaviour. Again, not perfect, not perfect. But even to say, I'm just human and I'm trying here, and maybe we will explain, or, again, I've got lots of pressures and demands and I'm stressed. Again, those things help, rather than just kind of whitewashing or brushing over those things. So that communication, owning yourself, and then helping them to own themselves as well.
And there's just one more big area that we want to talk about before we finish this podcast, and that is judgment and comparison. It's really, really hard to get advice or to reflect on your parenting, because most people feel judged and compare around how other people parent. Maybe even your parents are saying that you're too soft on your kids and you need to harden them up, or like you're constantly getting this advice from maybe parents, in-laws, siblings, friends, and we're always questioning whether we're doing a right job, because we ultimately want our children to grow up to be a better version of us. And it's in this judgment and comparison that we can get entangled in thinking we're not good enough and we're not doing a good enough job. And I encourage you to just kind of shut out the outside world and just look at your children for who they are, work on yourself, and help them develop emotional intelligence and help them regulate their emotions, and not allow them to go into these deep cycles of getting lost into this artificial world that we now live in, of gaming and social media and virtual reality. If you let your kids go way down into that rabbit hole, they will disconnect from themselves spiritually, emotionally, and they will just live in this new virtual reality, which is not real. So, yeah, what do you want to say about judgment and comparison? Because a lot of parents feel judged. A lot of parents will compare around how other people are parenting.
I know,
whether they're doing a good enough job.
The view that you see often is not even the view. I
bullshit.
actually love it when I hear somebody say how much it kind of is rubbish at times. Don't get me wrong, I love being a parent, but it is a tough job. And it is a thankless job at times. And there's times when I don't love it, and maybe I don't love myself that much because maybe I didn't behave in the way that I wish I had, but it would be looking at how much pressure and stress. So how can I shift and change that a little bit? But again, comparison, even our children are doing that in this online world of all these people that are like influencers. And what influence are they on the world? It really breaks my heart, because I think they're not really contributing anything. Again, we're viewing this false facade. It's like about having real conversations. I think we've noticed as our kids are growing up, especially our girls, they find that a lot of people don't talk in depth like they do, and it feels like a really lonely place. I think that we need to have conversations. I think we need to be calling out the BS on what we're kind of being shown, because don't compare, don't judge. It's only a tiny bit of the picture, might not even be the right picture. So all we do is focus on how can we be better. You have that internal gauge, and you know when you kind of didn't behave in the way that you would have liked. It's just that constant growth. It's meeting your kids where they're at. It's meeting yourself and just continually evolving. And so, again, as we said, we're not experts, but we have been through a lot.
So just in closing the podcast, Tracey, as a mum, what would be your number one advice to other mums when it comes to parenting? And then I'll do the same with dads.
You put me on the spot here.
You're on the spot.
Yeah, it depends. It depends what stage of life you're in. I think to assess clearly where you're at. And, you know, again, when I had 3 kids under 5, I was in the thick of it and it was so hard. There was no space for me. It's trying to carve out that tiny bit of time to maybe make a difference for my mental health so I can be better. I think it's looking at what you're working with. I think as your kids get older, I now live a bit of a different life. You know, I do this work that I love. My kids are a bit older. I have a bit more freedom, but yet there is massive demands. I would say it's just living in alignment with what's right for you. You know, you can't kind of seek advice from somebody else that's possibly not, and they might not even be talking about the stage that you're in.
Beautiful. So my advice to fathers would be, do your own inner work, is because men have been brought up to be stoic and to shut down their emotions and to just be the provider and the protector. And we are now moving into a massive stage of life that our children are going into where emotional intelligence is going to be the number one thing that is going to set kids apart when it comes to interacting in the world, getting a job, being successful. It's not intellectual intelligence. We've got AI. You can just ask your phone questions. It's emotional intelligence and a spiritual connection. So for us men, we need to break our old generational cycles, and we need to know that doing the inner work and being vulnerable and healing and releasing our own emotions and understanding our own inner child programming is by far the best thing that I've ever done as a parent. To show up as the real, true, authentic me and do the best that I can for my children through me being the example and the role model. So that's exactly what I encourage men to work on. Thank you for tuning in to this week's podcast. Anything in closing?
No.
Look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Evolved CEO podcast. If you value the information that is in our podcast, please like, subscribe, and add a review to our podcast page, because it'll help us understand the value that you are receiving, and more importantly, spread the word of this podcast. Also, share it with your friends and your family. Now, every listener of our podcast gets a free gift from us, and this is our 9 Pillars of Success, Love and Happiness life assessment. This is the exact same life assessment that our high-level clients, which are CEOs and business leaders, go through on an annual basis so that they can assess and reflect the past 12 months of their life and then plan their desired outcome for the next 12 months of their life. And this is our gift to you for listening in. So please follow the links below and you'll find the link to the assessment page. You'll also find Tracey and my social media links. We would love for you to connect with us on our social media channels, follow our additional content on there, as we want to provide as much value as we can in the event of helping you create more success, love and happiness in your life. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next